Easy, beast, you'll snap my spine. The alien woman yelled as the human treated her wound. Captain Lucas O'Connor stood by the wreckage of the ship, scanning the dense alien jungle surrounding him. His heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the crash set in. The ship had been sabotaged, and now his crew was scattered across this unknown, hostile planet. Their communication systems were down, and without any way of reaching the fleet, they were stranded. The storm that had thrown the ship into the planet's atmosphere was still raging above, but the worst of it had passed. Lucas knew they needed to move quickly. The ship's hull was breached, and the damaged equipment could attract the planet's predators. He had to find his crew, and quickly. His first priority was securing the injured. He had found Sergeant Miller near the ship's wreckage, bleeding from a deep gash on his leg. Lucas had used what medical supplies they had to patch him up, but they couldn't stay in one place too long. They needed shelter. "Captain," Miller had said weakly, "we're not the only ones here. I've seen something moving in the trees watching us." Lucas had no choice but to push the thought of dangerous predators out of his mind. First, he needed to get to the others. As he walked through the thick undergrowth, the sounds of the jungle seemed to grow louder, like the very air itself was alive with unknown dangers. The chirps of insects and the distant calls of creatures made his skin crawl. But then, amidst the noise, there was something else, a low, guttural growl that made Lucas freeze in place. His eyes darted to the trees, but the thick foliage obscured his view. Whatever it was close. He held his breath, waiting. Then he heard a rustle, a whisper of movement. It was a figure crouching low in the shadows. It moved with unnatural speed, like a predator closing in on its prey. Lucas's hand instinctively reached for his sidearm, but the figure was faster. In a blink, the creature pounced from the shadows, and Lucas barely had time to react before he was thrown to the ground. The alien towered over him, its eyes glowing like molten amber, fierce and unyielding. Its muscular body was covered in thick, dark scales, and its long, sharp claws gleamed in the fading light. Lucas grunted, trying to break free, but the alien's strength was overwhelming. With a swift, powerful motion, the creature pinned him down, its claws digging into the dirt beside his head. "You are too weak to be of any use," the alien hissed, its voice rough and guttural, yet unmistakably intelligent. Lucas stared up at the alien, trying to make sense of what was happening. He didn't speak its language, but somehow he understood. This wasn't an ordinary beast. It was something else entirely, something more than human, something far more dangerous. "Easy, beast," the alien growled, its eyes narrowing as it adjusted its grip on Lucas. "You'll snap my spine if you're not careful." For a moment, Lucas was stunned. It wasn't just attacking him, it was warning him as if it had the ability to reason. He didn't know whether to be terrified or fascinated. He knew that this was no ordinary alien. This was a warrior, a being with intelligence and strength beyond anything he had encountered before. The alien's claws relaxed slightly, and its massive frame shifted. Lucas realized that, despite its obvious power, it was still allowing him to make a move. It wasn't just about the fight, it was a test. Lucas exhaled, trying to think quickly. He needed a way out, but he didn't want to provoke the creature any further. This wasn't just a wild animal, it was a sentient being with its own code of honor. "Listen," Lucas said slowly, his voice steady despite the situation. "I don't want trouble, we're stranded here, my crew—" But before he could finish, the alien's claws tightened again. Lucas winced, but it wasn't painful, just a warning. "I know what you are," the alien said, its voice low and cold. "You are the ones who caused the crash. You've brought this destruction to our world." Lucas's mind raced. He had no idea how this alien knew about the crash. Had it been watching them the whole time? But there was no time for questions. He had to find a way to survive. "We're not here to fight," he said quickly, hoping to get through. "We need shelter. We can't survive out here alone. We don't know this planet." The alien tilted its head, studying him. For a moment, Lucas thought it would rip him apart. But instead, it spoke again. "Then we shall see if you are worthy of survival." The alien lifted Lucas up with ease, its hands gripping him like a child's toy. Lucas instinctively tensed, but the alien didn't throw him away. Instead, it looked around as if sensing something. It seemed to pause, as if considering its next move. "I am Zora," the alien said, its voice suddenly calm, yet still with an edge of authority. "And you are not the first to trespass here. Many have fallen before you." Lucas couldn't help but feel a wave of relief. Zora was its name. A name meant to give them some kind of recognition, a sign that this alien wasn't just a mindless monster. It was a sentient being, one with pride and a sense of identity. Still, Lucas knew the danger wasn't over. He had no idea what Zora intended to do with him. "Where's your ship?" Zora asked. "Did you truly think you could land on our world and leave without consequence?" "We didn't mean to," Lucas started, but Zora silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Then you will learn," Zora said, its voice full of ancient wisdom. "Perhaps the pain of your crew will be your lesson." Lucas could only watch as Zora effortlessly began to lead him deeper into the jungle, moving with surprising grace for such a large and powerful being. As they walked, Lucas kept his thoughts focused. The alien woman had just shown him her power, but he could feel the edge of curiosity in her eyes. She wasn't as certain of the situation as she appeared. She wanted to understand him as much as he wanted to understand her. At that moment, Lucas knew the next few hours would determine their survival. He could either fight Zora, risking his life, and possibly his crew's, or he could attempt to earn her trust. There was no telling which path would lead to safety. After a tense silence, Lucas spoke again. "We're not your enemy. We didn't come here to destroy your world." Zora glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "That is the most foolish thing I've ever heard," she muttered under her breath, but she didn't strike him. Instead, she moved forward, guiding them to a small clearing in the dense trees. As they reached the edge of the jungle, Lucas spotted the remains of something, an ancient structure, crumbled and overtaken by vines. Zora stopped in front of it, turning to face him. "Here," she said, "for now you will stay with me, but don't get too comfortable. I don't trust you." Lucas nodded, understanding the warning. "I'll earn it," he said quietly, determined not to give up hope, and with that they both stepped into the ruins. Lucas didn't know what would come next. All he could do was survive, and maybe, just maybe, gain Zora's trust. The night was falling, and the distant growls of unseen creatures filled the air. He didn't know what dangers lay ahead. But one thing was clear. The only way to survive was to face them together. Lucas woke up to the sound of distant roars echoing through the jungle. The night had fallen quickly, and the air was thick with humidity. He hadn't slept well, his body aching from the crash and the strange events of the previous day. Zora had kept to herself, sitting vigilantly by the entrance of the ancient structure. She was a warrior, and from the way she carried herself, Lucas could tell that she never let her guard down, not even for a moment. He rubbed his eyes, still trying to adjust to the alien landscape around him. The ruins were vast, with towering stone structures that seemed to defy time itself. Moss and vines crept over the crumbling buildings, and strange bioluminescent plants lit the area in soft, eerie glows. The silence of the night was broken only by the occasional howl or screech of unseen creatures in the distance. Zora stood up as he stirred, her sharp eyes locking onto him. "Get up," she commanded, her voice firm. "We have to move." "The creatures are drawn to the scent of the crash. We can't stay here." Lucas nodded, already on his feet. He wasn't in the best shape, but he knew he couldn't afford to waste any time. His thoughts went to his crew, scattered somewhere in the jungle, possibly in danger. He had to find them, but the reality of his situation was sinking in. He was stuck on an alien world with no way of communicating with Earth, and the only ally he had was a fierce, distrustful alien warrior who had shown him only a fraction of her true power. Zora led the way through the ruins, her movements as fluid as a predator on the hunt. She didn't wait for Lucas to catch up, as if she were testing him. It wasn't until he was beside her that she spoke again. "You're slow," she said bluntly, not even glancing at him. Lucas couldn't help but smile at the comment. There was something strangely comforting about her directness. It reminded him of the no-nonsense leaders he'd worked with back home. "I'm not used to running through an alien jungle," he replied. "Give me a break." Zora's eyes flickered toward him, her expression unreadable. "No excuses," she muttered, picking up her pace. "You're the one who chose to come here. Keep up." The jungle was thick, and the underbrush made every step a challenge. Lucas was surprised at how agile Zora was, despite her size. She seemed to glide through the dense foliage, avoiding obstacles with ease. He was forced to push through the thorns and branches, occasionally tripping over roots, but he kept his pace steady. There was no time to be weak now. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the jungle. The temperature was rising, and Lucas could feel the sweat soaking his clothes. His legs were beginning to feel heavy, and he was starting to wonder just how much longer he could keep up with Zora. She had barely even broken a sweat. You seem to be getting slower, Zora remarked, glancing back at him. Perhaps you're not cut out for this. Lucas gritted his teeth but didn't answer. He couldn't afford to let her see him struggle. He had to show her that he was capable, that he could handle whatever this planet threw at him. The sun broke through the thick canopy above, casting dappled light across the jungle floor. As they continued on, Lucas's thoughts kept drifting back to the crash. His crew, the rest of the team, they had to be alive. He just had to find them. He couldn't leave anyone behind, but Zora didn't seem to care about that. She moved with a singular focus, her eyes scanning the horizon as if there was no one else in the world. When they finally came to a stop, Lucas was exhausted. He couldn't keep up with her speed and stamina anymore. He bent down, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Zora didn't even stop walking. "Rest if you must," she said over her shoulder, "but not for long. I will not waste time waiting for you." Lucas watched her for a moment, wondering what it was that drove her. What was her mission? What did she care about? It was clear she wasn't just a warrior for hire. She was part of something much bigger. But she wasn't ready to share that with him yet. Maybe she never would. He stood up, pushing the thoughts aside. He couldn't afford to dwell on things that didn't matter. Right now, survival was all that mattered. If he wanted to make it off this planet, he had to keep moving. Zora led them onward, and Lucas followed, a sense of unease growing in his gut. They hadn't encountered any hostile creatures since the jungle's edge, but he knew better than to assume they were safe. He had no idea what dangers this world had in store for them. Hours later, they came upon a large clearing. The landscape here was starkly different from the thick jungle they had been traversing. The ground was rocky and uneven, with scattered boulders and strange, twisted trees. It felt almost like a natural battleground, as though the planet itself was preparing for something violent. "This is where I stop," Zora said, finally turning to face him. "I have to go on alone." Lucas frowned, confused. "What do you mean, alone?" Zora's expression darkened. "This is my fight, not yours," she said, her voice quieter now. There was an edge of sadness to it, as though this was something she had resigned herself to. "I came here for a reason you won't understand. I don't need you to help me, not anymore." Lucas stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "If you think I'm going to leave you to die here alone, you're wrong. We're in this together. We need each other." Zora looked at him, her amber eyes glowing faintly. "You are not like the others. I thought you might understand. But no matter what, you're still human. Your kind doesn't understand what it means to be truly alone." Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but Zora raised a hand to silence him. "I don't expect you to understand my burden," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "But I can't let you follow me any further. You'll only be a distraction." "Then I'll be a distraction," Lucas replied, his voice full of resolve. "But I'm staying. If we're going to get out of here, we do it together." Zora studied him for a long moment, her eyes cold and calculating. Lucas could see the conflict within her. She was proud, perhaps too proud to accept help, but deep down he knew she recognized his determination. Finally, with a sigh, she nodded. "Fine," she said. "But don't think I'm going to make it easy on you." The two of them continued through the rocky terrain, the air thick with tension. As they made their way deeper into the clearing, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to shift, every rustle of leaves seemed too deliberate. He knew they weren't alone. Zora's hand instinctively went to the weapon at her side, and she gestured for Lucas to do the same. "We'll need to be ready," she whispered. "Something S out there." Before Lucas could respond, a loud crash echoed through the clearing. Something large, moving with incredible speed, burst from the underbrush. It was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen, tall, with long limbs covered in spiny armor and eyes that glowed a fierce, unnatural green. Zora sprang into action, moving faster than Lucas thought possible. She drew her weapon and fired in one fluid motion, striking the creature square in the chest. But the creature only staggered for a moment before charging again, its claws slashing through the air. Lucas didn't hesitate. He fired his weapon, aiming for the creature's legs. The blast hit its side, causing the creature to stumble. Zora was already moving again, her strength and agility more than a match for the beast. She leaped forward, her weapon striking with precision, and the creature fell to the ground with a deafening roar. They both stood panting, the silence that followed the battle deafening. The creature lay still at their feet, and Lucas couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Zora had been incredible, strong, fast, and utterly fearless. "You're not so bad after all," Zora said, glancing at him with a smirk. Lucas grinned, feeling a sense of pride. "I told you I could keep up." But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The jungle was full of dangers, and the real test was yet to come. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting for his crew, for Zora, and for a chance to make it off this planet alive. The clearing where they had stopped felt unnaturally quiet now, the air thick with the scent of the fallen creature. Lucas stood beside Zora, who was watching the beast's body closely, her eyes scanning the jungle for any more threats. Despite their victory, Lucas could tell the tension hadn't eased. In fact, it felt like it had only grown heavier. "That was close," Lucas said, still catching his breath. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, feeling the sticky sweat mixed with the dirt from the crash. Zora didn't respond immediately, her sharp gaze still fixed on the creature's remains. She bent down and inspected it for a moment, then looked at Lucas. "You did well," she said, her voice betraying a hint of approval. Lucas blinked in surprise. Zora rarely complimented him, and when she did, it always came with a level of suspicion or caution. "Thanks," he said, his voice careful. She didn't respond, but Lucas noticed the way she studied him now. She had always been a little distant, treating him like a burden or an ally she didn't fully trust. But after the fight, something had shifted. He wasn't sure what it was, but Zora was beginning to look at him differently. Maybe it was because of how he had reacted in the heat of battle, or maybe it was because they were surviving together. Whatever the reason, Lucas was determined to prove that he could be more than just a passenger on this journey. "We need to keep moving," Zora said after a long pause, breaking his thoughts. She straightened up and turned her back on the dead creature, leading the way forward without waiting for Lucas to catch up. He followed her silently, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. Every step felt like it was taking them deeper into unknown territory. The jungle was vast, and there was no sign of their ship or his crew. The longer they went without finding anything, the more Lucas felt the panic rising in his chest. But he kept pushing it down. Panicking wouldn't help anyone. The jungle was changing. The trees had become taller, their trunks stretching high into the sky, blocking out most of the light. The air was thicker here, and the sounds of the creatures seemed to come from all directions. It was as if they were being watched by something much bigger than the creature they had just fought. After several more hours of walking, they reached a large ridge that overlooked a wide river. The water flowed swiftly, its current moving with power. The land beyond it was open, with wide plains dotted with clusters of strange, bioluminescent plants. The view was breathtaking, but Lucas wasn't looking at the landscape. His eyes were scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of his crew. "Is this the way out?" he asked, stepping up to Zora, who had stopped at the edge of the ridge. Zora was quiet for a moment, her gaze focused on the river below. "It's not an escape," she said softly, her voice distant. "It's a crossroads. The path you choose now will determine everything." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" Zora turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "The river leads to the heart of this planet. There you'll find the truth about what happened here, about my people and why you're here." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what she meant by the truth, but something about the way she said it made him uneasy. Zora wasn't the type to talk about her past, and for her to mention it now, it had to be important. Whatever she had been through, whatever secrets she was hiding, they were now tied to him. "If we cross this river, there's no going back," Zora continued, her voice steady, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty for the briefest moment. "I don't know if you're ready for what lies ahead. You're not one of us, you won't understand." Lucas stepped closer to her, his eyes searching her face. "I don't need to understand. I need to find my crew, and I need to get us off this planet." Zora studied him for a long moment, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Then let's cross. But remember this, human, some things are better left unknown." Lucas nodded, not fully understanding the weight of her words, but not willing to back down. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, he was fighting for his team. And if this was the way to get them back, he had no choice but to follow. They made their way down the ridge, carefully navigating the rocky path to the river's edge. The current was strong, but not impassable. Zora looked at him one last time, her expression unreadable before she stepped into the water. Lucas followed, his boots sinking into the muddy riverbed as the cold water rushed past his legs. The crossing wasn't easy. The current tried to pull them downstream, and the rocks underfoot were slippery. Zora moved with ease, her experience with rough terrain evident in every step. But Lucas struggled to keep his footing, the weight of his gear and his injuries from the crash making it harder to maintain his balance. Still, he pressed on, determined not to fall behind. By the time they reached the other side, Lucas was soaked through, and his muscles were screaming in protest. But Zora showed no sign of slowing down. She was already moving ahead, her steps quick and confident. "We're not done yet," she called over her shoulder, her voice a little sharper now. "The worst is still to come." Lucas followed her, his mind racing. What had she meant? What kind of dangers awaited them ahead? He couldn't imagine what could be worse than the creatures they had already faced, but Zora had been clear. Whatever they were about to encounter, it was something that would change everything. The landscape on the other side of the river was different. The bioluminescent plants became more frequent, glowing brightly in the dusk. But the trees were sparser here, and the land was more open. Still, the air was thick with tension, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They hadn't gone far when they encountered their first real obstacle, a massive wall of jagged stone, stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a natural barrier, but one that seemed to have been shaped, almost deliberately, to block off the rest of the land beyond. Zora came to a stop in front of the wall, her expression hardening. "We're here." Lucas blinked, unsure of what she meant. "Here? What's this place?" "This is the gateway," Zora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Beyond this wall lies the truth. Everything you need to know about this planet, about my people, and about why your ship was brought down." Lucas swallowed hard. His heart raced, and a part of him wanted to turn back. But he knew he couldn't, not now. Zora stepped forward, her hands brushing the surface of the stone. It was smooth, almost too smooth for natural rock. As her fingers moved over the surface, a low hum filled the air, and the wall began to shift. Slowly it parted in the middle, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. "Welcome to the heart of this planet," Zora said softly. "And remember, human, what you find here may change everything." Lucas took a deep breath, stepping forward into the unknown. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he was certain of one thing. There was no turning back now. The passageway beyond the stone wall was narrow, its walls smooth and dark, as though the rock had been carved by ancient hands. As Lucas stepped into the darkness, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The air was cooler here, the silence heavy, as if the world outside had been shut out. There were no sounds of the jungle now, no birds, no rustling of leaves. Just the faint echo of his footsteps as he walked in Zora's wake. Zora moved ahead of him, her silhouette sharp against the faint glow of the bioluminescent plants that lined the walls. She didn't look back, but Lucas could sense that she was aware of every detail, every shift in the atmosphere. She was comfortable here, like she had been here before. They walked for what felt like hours, though time seemed to lose meaning in this dark, eerie space. The narrow passage eventually opened up into a large chamber, its ceiling stretching high above them. The floor was smooth and made of a strange, shimmering material that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. It reminded Lucas of the stories he had read about ancient civilizations, places of power and mystery, built by beings whose technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever achieved. At the far end of the chamber, there was a massive stone structure, its shape almost resembling a throne, but it was covered in strange symbols and carvings that Lucas didn't recognize. The air here felt charged, like the very atmosphere was alive with energy. He could feel it in his chest, a strange vibration that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "This is it," Zora said quietly, her voice low and almost reverent. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing the carvings on the stone as she approached the structure. "This is where it all began." Lucas hesitated, his eyes scanning the room, trying to understand what he was looking at. "What is this place?" he asked. "Why did you bring me here?" Zora didn't answer immediately. She stood before the stone structure for a moment, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke, her voice a mixture of bitterness and sorrow. "This is the heart of my people," she said. "The place where we were born, the place where our power was created." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean, created? What are you talking about?" Zora turned to face him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "My people were not born as we are now, we were. Altered, this place, this technology, it changed us. It gave us strength, but it also cursed us. We were made into something more, but at the cost of everything we once were." Lucas stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. He had heard whispers of ancient alien civilizations that had unlocked great power, only to lose something in the process, something vital. But hearing Zora speak of it so plainly, as if it was a truth she had lived with all her life, made him realize how much he didn't know about her people. "How did it happen?" Lucas asked. "How did this place change your people?" Zora's eyes darkened, and she turned back to the stone structure, her fingers still tracing the carvings. "We were the first to find this place, long before your kind ever reached the stars. We were a peaceful people, content with what we had. But when we discovered this technology, it changed us. It gave us the power to control things we didn't understand. It made us unstoppable, but it came at a price. The technology fed on our emotions, our desires. It twisted us, made us hunger for more. And in the end, it led to war." She paused, and for a moment, Lucas saw something he hadn't expected: regret. It was faint, barely there, but it was real. Zora wasn't just a warrior. She was someone who had lived through the consequences of her people's actions. "The war destroyed everything," Zora continued, her voice quieter now. "We fought against each other, tearing apart everything we once knew. Families, cities, entire civilizations were lost, and in the end, this place, this source of power, became a prison. We sealed it away, hoping that no one else would ever find it. But now you've found it." Lucas's mind raced. This wasn't just a simple crash landing. He hadn't just stumbled onto an alien planet. He had walked into the heart of a war that had been fought long before humanity had even taken its first steps into space. And somehow, Zora had become part of that history. "This place is dangerous, isn't it?" Lucas asked quietly. Zora nodded, her face hardening. "More dangerous than you could ever imagine. It doesn't just give power, it takes it too. It feeds on everything. Anger, fear, pride, hate. It consumes us. My people became addicted to it, and when they could no longer control it, they turned on each other." Lucas could see the pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about survival for her. This was about redemption, about understanding a part of herself and her people that had been buried for so long. "So what happens now?" Lucas asked. "What do we do? What are we supposed to do with all of this?" Zora turned back to the stone structure, her gaze unwavering. "I don't know, but I know this. You cannot let this power fall into the wrong hands. If anyone else, any other species, finds this place, they will try to use it. And they will become just like us, destroyed." Lucas took a deep breath. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was standing on the edge of something much bigger than himself, a conflict that spanned generations, a conflict that had shaped this planet and its people. And somehow he had become a part of it. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice steady. Zora looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to gauge whether he truly understood the gravity of what she was saying. "You have to help me destroy this place. It cannot be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. It cannot happen again." Lucas didn't hesitate. "We'll do it, we'll destroy it." Zora's lips tightened into a grim smile. "It won't be easy, the power here. It will fight back, we'll have to be prepared." She stepped toward the stone structure, her hand resting on the surface, and the air seemed to hum with energy. Lucas could feel it now, an undercurrent of power, as if the entire chamber was alive with the pulse of something ancient, something dangerous. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, and the walls seemed to close in, as if the room itself was watching them. "What happens if we fail?" Lucas asked. Zora's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Then we all die." Lucas's blood ran cold at the finality of her words. There was no room for failure here. They were playing with forces they couldn't possibly understand, and if they didn't succeed, everything they had fought for, everything they had survived, would be lost. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far, and the choice was clear. Destroy the power that had ruined Zora's people, or let it consume them all. Zora stepped away from the stone structure, her eyes locked on Lucas. "Are you ready?" Lucas nodded, his mind made up. There was no going back. "Let's do it." And with that, they prepared themselves for the final battle, not just for survival, but for the fate of an entire planet and the echoes of a war that had raged long before them. The chamber trembled beneath their feet, the hum of the ancient power growing louder as they approached. The heart of the stone structure. Lucas could feel it now, deep in his bones. The energy that had been dormant for centuries was awakening. Every step he took made the air around him feel heavier, like it was pressing in on him, squeezing the breath from his lungs. Zora was ahead, her movements steady and calculated, as if she had walked this path 100 times before. The stone walls glowed faintly, the carvings on them shifting as though they were alive, reacting to the presence of their intruders. Lucas could feel his pulse quicken. This was no ordinary place. The power here was ancient, vast, and utterly alien. He had seen what it could do to Zora's people, how it twisted their minds and tore them apart. He couldn't let it happen again. He caught up to Zora, who had stopped in front of a massive, pulsating core at the center of the room. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a swirling mass of energy, encased in a lattice of metal and stone, its surface crackling with power. The air around it shimmered as if the very fabric of reality was warping in its presence. It was the source of everything, the power, the destruction, the war. This was what had changed Zora's people, what had brought them to the brink of annihilation. "Here it is," Zora said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the core. Her eyes were fixed on it, her expression unreadable. "This is what gave us power, and this is what will destroy us if we don't stop it." Lucas took a step closer, feeling the heat radiating from the core. His skin prickled, and he could almost feel the power reaching out to him, trying to pull him in. It was intoxicating, seductive in its energy, and he could see how easily someone could lose themselves in it. He could see how Zora's people had fallen to its influence. It was like a drug. Once you tasted it, you couldn't stop. "Is this the way to destroy it?" Lucas asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. He wasn't sure how they could defeat something so powerful, something that seemed to be beyond the reach of any weapon he had. Zora nodded grimly. "We must destroy the core itself. The energy here is what feeds the power. If we can sever its connection, if we can disrupt its flow, the whole system will collapse. But we have to be careful. If we don't do it right, everything will explode." Lucas finished for her, already knowing the answer. She met his gaze, her eyes cold and unflinching. "Yes. If we fail, the explosion will be more than just a blast. It will be a wave of destruction rippling through the entire planet. The energy here is linked to everything, the land, the creatures, the very air. If we don't stop it, it will destroy us all." Lucas swallowed hard. The weight of the situation was heavier than ever now. They weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting for the entire planet. The consequences of failure were unimaginable. He glanced at Zora, who had already begun examining the core, her hands moving over the intricate mechanisms that surrounded it. She seemed to know what she was doing, but there was no room for mistakes. "Can you do it?" Lucas asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Zora didn't answer immediately. She simply continued to work, her fingers tracing the edges of the stone lattice. After a few moments, she looked back at him, her face set in determination. "There is no other way," she said. "This is the only chance we have. If we don't destroy it now, this power will consume everything." Lucas nodded, his mind made up. There was no turning back. He moved closer to her, ready to help in whatever way he could. "Let's do it then." Zora reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a small, glowing device. It was a simple thing, but to Lucas, it felt like the key to their survival. She attached the device to the core, and for a moment, nothing happened. The hum of the room seemed to grow louder, more intense, and Lucas could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This was it. They were either going to succeed or they were going to die trying. Zora's hands moved quickly, pressing a series of buttons on the device. For a moment, the room seemed to go still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, with a sharp crack, the core's energy flared up, brighter than it had ever been before. The room shook violently, and Lucas stumbled back, his heart racing. "It's working," Zora said, her voice tight with effort. "But we need to overload it. The device will only hold for a few moments." "Do you have a plan?" Lucas asked, his eyes fixed on the device as it pulsed with energy. Zora nodded. "We have to trigger the overload manually." "I can't do it alone. I need you to activate the emergency override." Lucas didn't hesitate. He moved quickly to the console beside the core, his hands trembling as he searched for the right controls. The room was shaking more now, the vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. The power from the core was spilling out, radiating through the walls, and Lucas could feel it in his chest, like a weight pressing down on him. He found the override switch and slammed his hand down on it, praying that it would work. The lights flickered, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. Then, with a deafening roar, the core's energy shot outward, filling the room with blinding light. "Now," Zora shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the energy. "We need to pull the device." Lucas didn't need to be told twice. He ran back to the core, grabbing the device and yanking it free. The moment it came loose, the energy in the room exploded and Lucas was thrown back against the wall, the force of the blast knocking the wind out of him. For a moment, everything went dark. The air was thick with dust, and Lucas could barely hear over the ringing in his ears. He struggled to his feet, his vision blurry. When his senses returned, he saw Zora standing across the room, her eyes wide with shock but alive. The core was no longer glowing. The energy had been severed and the hum of power had stopped. "We did it," Zora whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Lucas could hardly believe it himself. They had done it. The core was destroyed. The power that had once held the planet in its grip was gone, and the weight that had been pressing on him for so long had finally lifted. But their relief was short-lived. The ground beneath them began to shake again, more violently than before. The walls cracked and large chunks of stone fell from the ceiling. It wasn't over. The planet was reacting to the loss of the power and the destruction was just beginning. "We need to get out of here," Lucas shouted, his voice hoarse. "Now!" Zora didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed his arm, and they ran, dodging falling debris as the chamber around them crumbled. The entire structure was collapsing, and they had to move fast if they were going to make it out alive. The passageway they had come through was now blocked, the stones falling behind them like a flood of rock. But Zora led the way, finding an alternate route through the collapsing ruins. They sprinted through the darkness, barely making it out of the crumbling structure before the entire building collapsed behind them in a massive explosion of dust and debris. They emerged into the open air, gasping for breath as they looked back at the ruins. The planet was shaking, the tremors now spreading across the land. The destruction wasn't just limited to the chamber, it was everywhere. But they were alive. And for the first time since they had crashed, Lucas felt a sense of peace. They had done it. They had stopped the power that had nearly destroyed Zora's people. They had saved the planet from its own destructive past. Zora stood beside him, her expression unreadable. But Lucas saw the flicker of something in her eyes, a mixture of relief and sadness. "We did it," Lucas said, his voice steady now. Zora nodded, but she didn't speak. Instead, she looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise over the jagged mountains in the distance. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax just a little. "We did," she said quietly, "but the cost of victory is always high." Lucas nodded, understanding. They had won, but the price had been steep. And though they had destroyed the core, the scars of the past would always remain. They stood together in silence, watching the dawn break over a planet that had been saved, but only just.